So we start off with our reading this morning and with these words, her whole life, because that is what she gave. When you translate the scripture from the Greek is certain and clear. The Greek doesn't say that she just gave a portion or that she tithed or that she gave a percentage. It's that she gave her whole life. Well, this text is often used during stewardship campaigns to remind and encourage people to give generously. But I want us instead this morning to take a moment and reflect upon those words of her whole life, her whole living. Now, none of us can give that to any one person or any one thing. So I don't think we should reduce her donation to a percentage or a portion. So her whole life, why? Was it out of obligation or out of respect, demand, expectation, or even religiosity? Or maybe all of the above. She gave her whole life because she had no other options. And she gave her whole life because that's what she depended on. She was caught up in a system and was trapped in expectations that demanded more of her than she could practically give. Knowing that her future depended on her present, she had to do what she did. She had to surrender. We also know that surrender is the key ingredient in this program of recovery. And it is indeed the starting point. And in some ways we can look at it as a paradoxical approach. Surrender to that enemy that you've been fighting. When you admit that you are powerless over alcohol and drugs, that implies a surrender. It is a big shift from all the times of trying to control and manage your use, and the worse it got, the harder you tried. So what happens when you surrender? Well, for one, you stop doing direct battle. And instead of trying to control your use, there's a surrender and an understanding and an acceptance that this thing has gotten the better of me and it's out of my control. And until this moment, there have been a lot of yeah buts and maybes and what ifs. But surrender implies a shift. It's a sudden change. Surrender is a cessation of resistance. You stop fiercely defending old ideas, old messages, and ideas of how things are supposed to look like or how you think they might be. Battling addiction is like wrestling a porcupine. The harder you fight, the more quills and needles get embedded in your body. But when you surrender and you stop that fighting, the possibility of healing opens up. And I think that we can see this value of surrender in the woman in our story. We see the values in this woman of having a generous heart, a grateful spirit, and a generous attitude. So let's move into our reading this morning. We find that they were all in the temple area near the treasury. And from their vantage point, they could see what people were putting in the offering plates. And some of the wealthy folks were putting in large sums of money. And surprisingly, these large sums and the people giving are not what is impressive or grabs attention. But along comes a poor widow who gives first of all from a genuine heart. In that previous verse, we find the religious leaders engaged in argument and a debate about paying taxes to the emperor and about which commandments are the most important, and even how about certain laws are related to marriage and how they can be interpreted in different circumstances. This debate is not engaged from a genuine heart for learning more of God's ways for God's people, but more about gaining power and control and setting theological traps in order to discredit. And we know that argument. We know that argument in our own lives. Might be trying to outsmart the disease, or wanting to bait with those who are offering suggestions and help, finding ways to critique the big book, looking for those wedges that sometimes exist between AA and NA, and then settling deep into those wedges. Anything that can disprove why this program might work for me. Anything that might bring back a sense of control and a place where the ego gets to be back in charge. So it's much like those religious leaders in the story who like to be seen with their long robes and to impressively display their authority. I related that to thinking about all the war stories that can go on in the smoking gazebos and using positions of influence to their advantage. As it says in our reading, like getting the best seats in the house and seats of honor at banquets. Their hearts contain the wrong motives, and they are out to make themselves look good in the sight of others. But in contrast, we can look at this widow and say, that is what I'm after. Her motives are pure, and she clearly gives out of a genuine heart for God. And although her gift is meager in comparison to the large sums given by the wealthy, it is by far the greater gift because it comes from her heart. To me, this is similar to someone being honest and open and willing in their recovery versus someone who is still trying to play the game and say all the right things to get people off their back. And I think it's easy for us to kind of fluctuate back and forth between those two places. And so that is why it is so important to have that daily inventory, spending some honest time to reflect upon our day and notice those places when we were of service, and those places where we were dishonest, those places where resentment and ego took over, versus those places where we were open and willing to listen and be of service. So I want to suggest that the place to begin in our own giving, and that can look like a lot of different ways, is to examine our own hearts and take that honest inventory. Do we desire to give God the very best that we have from all that we have? And do we desire and do we have the willingness to place the God of each of our own understanding at the very center of our lives? Well, there's something else also at work with this woman. For her to be able to give such an extravagant gift, she must be giving from a grateful spirit. And her gratitude is unspoken, but is clearly her motivation in giving. Because why else would one give so much when they have so little? Dr. Michael McCullough, editor of the book, The Psychology of Gratitude, shares that scientific research reveals what most of us were either taught by grandmothers or kindergarten teachers all along, that taking time daily to be grateful for the blessings in our lives leads to a higher degree of satisfaction and a sense of well-being. He writes that your grandmother was right. When people are encouraged to take a few moments every day, even as little time as 2 or 3 minutes a day, to simply appreciate a few positive things, you end up feeling better at the end of the day about your life in general. We see boosts in positive emotion. We see reductions in negative emotion. People are more satisfied with their lives as a whole, and they even sleep better at night. I do believe that a grateful heart is a foundation of an emotionally and spiritually healthy life. And all of us would do well to take time each and every day to reflect on what we are grateful for in our lives. And we also know that there's so many different ways to do this. I know some people keep a gratitude journal. Others can share with the people around them those things that they're grateful for during the day. There are different challenges that are out there, from 100 days of happiness to one that I'm currently doing that's called a 30-day gratitude challenge, where we get a journal prompt for the day with ideas to follow. And even yesterday's was, what are you grateful for about your home? And then the challenge at the end was to give something back to your home, whether that was organizing a closet, cleaning out the refrigerator, or even walking around the neighborhood, just being grateful for where you live. Well, we also see the woman in our reading, that she has a generous attitude. Her gift is clearly the most generous of all, not in the amount of the gift, but in the sacrifice behind it. And we hear in our reading that all of them have contributed out of their abundance. But she, out of her poverty, has put in everything she had and all that she had to live on. Well, generosity has a way of multiplying itself. We begin to understand that I have to give away what I have received in this program in order to receive more and to grow. And we also learn that when I truly build a relationship with the God of my understanding, and when I build a relationship with this fellowship, then my joys are multiplied with the joys of others, and my sorrows are halved by sharing them with others. And I believe that there are ways that we can cultivate having a genuine heart and a grateful spirit and a generous attitude. And it begins with that first step. It begins with surrender. Surrender is a transformation of posture, a major change of attitude. It's like a dam has burst and outside thoughts and ideas and influences that have been kept at bay can finally start to seep in. And while it appears that the main aspect of surrender is an acknowledgement that you cannot control your use anymore, there are simultaneous changes occurring on other fronts that are crucial in setting the wheels of recovery in motion. That entire system of defense, involving rationalization, minimalization, distortion, and denial, it's fragile, like a glass bubble. And when it gets cracked open in one place, then that entire structure can start to crumble. And so new ideas can enter in. New ways of living can start to enter in, and transformation begins on many fronts. Surrender is an act of saying yes. And prior to that, there were lots of no's. No, I don't want to give up my use. No, I don't want to get help. I don't need help. No, it is not out of my control. I will manage this myself. But now with surrender, I can say yes. Yes, I can see that my life has become unmanageable. And yes, I do need and I do want help. And yes, I believe that life can be happy and peace-filled. And yes, I am worth recovery. There is power in saying yes. Yes is positive. When you say yes, you are affirming something and you are letting something in. There is a release in all that tension by saying yes. Yes, I need a power greater than myself to restore sanity back into my life. And yes, I have made that decision to turn my life and will over to God's care. And yes, I am willing to follow the suggestions offered by others. And yes, I am willing to be of service and to reach out and help others. It's one of these amazing gifts that God can take that yes, God can take that willingness to surrender, and when it's given from a genuine heart, when it's given with a grateful spirit and a generous attitude, multiply it many times over. My wish for all of us is that God bless us in this season of our lives, wherever we find ourselves today, that we be blessed with those very characteristics, that we come with a generous heart, a grateful spirit, and a generous attitude. Amen.